Welcome back to Press Review in Depth. While ISIS has now made significant gains in Iraq and is now calling itself just IS, it remains unclear how much staying power the movement has and where it's going. Meanwhile, many are still talking about an independent Kurdish state forming. Let's take a look at what the press is saying. The Telegraph asks the question, is the Islamic State the new Taliban? Rob Crilly says in 1996, Mullah Omar took to the roof of a mosque in Kandahar and wrapped himself in a cloak reputed to have once been worn by the Prophet Muhammad. He was declared commander of the faithful, and 6 months later his Taliban troops conquered Kabul. The question analysts and military commanders must now ponder is whether Baghdadi's Islamic State can follow suit and sweep to power. He adds, at first glance, both the Islamic State and the Taliban have comparable strengths and weaknesses. Both have used similar rapid offensives to win swathes of territory. Crilly says, but by 2001, hundreds of thousands of people had fled Afghanistan's high unemployment and hardline law, suggesting that draconian Islamic states tend to fail if given enough time. And the article concludes, so far the Islamic State has managed to make progress in a similar way, capitalising on anger at the sectarian corrupt government of Nouri al-Maliki. But it is bolstered by numerous fellow travellers, including former jihadis, tribal leaders and Baathists, whose different agendas may mean the fragile coalition is only temporary. And The Independent features a piece saying Kurds are pinning their hopes on an oil-rich future. The article says Iraqi Kurds have already governed their territory that extends from Iraq's northern and western border with Turkey to the Iranian border in the east for more than 2 decades. The article adds, in the contested oil-rich region of Kirkuk, Iraq's Kurdish minority has been steadily consolidating control for weeks. On the southern edge of the province, in an area once secured by central government forces, Kurdish soldiers are reinforcing a shaky border, separating them from their new southern neighbours, the Sunni militants of ISIS. Kirkuk is of central importance to the Kurds. The article adds that the president of the Kurdistan Regional Government, Mr. Barzani, told a closed-door meeting of the Kurdish parliament last week that he would pursue independence only after formalising Kurdish control of Kirkuk and other disputed areas. The article adds the Kurds have begun to establish an independent revenue stream to replace the money they have customarily received from Baghdad by building their own oil sector, but oil sales need to rise dramatically to replace the money from Baghdad. The article concludes, getting the pipeline up and running is more about political will than technical capabilities. Kurdish leaders have negotiated with the Federal Oil Ministry over how they might help to export Kirkuk oil, but they have not agreed on terms. I'm now joined by Hassan Hassan, journalist and research associate at the Delma Institute in Abu Dhabi. Thank you for joining us, Hassan.
Thank you.
So I've just looked at an analysis of ISIS comparing their movement to the Taliban in Afghanistan. Can we make any sort of comparisons between the two?
I think you can in many ways in terms of ideology. They subscribe to the same or to a similar ideology. The problem, usually people make a comparison between Al-Qaeda and Taliban, and they say that the Taliban was less extremist than Al-Qaeda. I think, in my opinion, ISIS is a whole different thing. It's more extreme than the extreme. It's more extreme than either Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. But the three of them subscribe to a similar ideology, which is the jihadi, the Salafi jihadi, ideas.
And what sort of staying power does ISIS have as a movement compared to, as you said, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban?
I think it has. ISIS is benefiting from a whole set of factors in Iraq or even in Syria that make their existence and endurance more likely than ever before. For example, if you consider the circumstances now or compare them with the circumstances in 2007 when the Al-Qaeda in Iraq was eradicated, it's a whole different scenario. At the time, the American troops were there. The Iraqi government was seen as, or wasn't seen as sectarian, and Sunni, Sunnis in the northwest were already, fed up with Al-Qaeda, and they were ready to cooperate with both the Americans and the central government to fight ISIS, or ISIS at the time, which was Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
And
but now ISIS, or IS as it's known now, is playing an entirely different game. They're more sophisticated. They cooperate with the local population. While they control the areas, they kind of allow some kind of autonomy to the local population to govern themselves.
And if ISIS, or as it's now known, the Islamic State, establishes a caliphate in the region, how would this fit into an international system composed of nation states that adhere to multilateral agreements?
I think there are two different things. If you take the threat of ISIS seriously, or take ISIS or IS serious itself. I don't think any country in the region or internationally will accept IS to govern as a state. But it will stay, and I see it existing for the next few years. But I don't think they can integrate into the international system in any way. Mostly because they're rejected by the local population. They're been fighting rebels in Syria, for example. They've been fighting ISIS for almost more than a year now, and it's just the people reject their foreign ideas and their rigid ideology.
Do you think that ISIS itself will, or as it's now known, IS, will seek any kind of international legitimacy?
I think they will try to seek de facto, acceptance of them controlling the areas, and they will do that. They already, I think, following certain policies to make sure that they're not on the defensive, but rather on the offensive. So they're fighting here and there in Iraq, outside their areas of control, and they pose some kind of imminent, maybe a potential threat to neighboring countries, and I think part of the strategy at the moment is to make countries in the region feel if they fight them, they will fight back. So I think many countries in the region are now kind of avoiding any direct confrontation with IS. So they will accept, they will seek to have that kind of recognition that they are the kings in their areas, but nothing more than that.
And
because they reject the whole international system. They think the international system intrinsically is intrinsically opposed to any kind of Islamic State.
And of course, the other major force in the region, the Kurds, seem to have their own organised military structure with the Peshmerga troops, and also what seems to be the beginning of an economic system based on Kirkuk's oil resources. How viable now is an independent Kurdistan at this stage?
I think it's very viable. A de facto Kurdistan has existed for years. They have governed themselves for over a decade. Maybe 2 decades now, or close to 2 decades. They have the expertise, they have the skills and the manpower. As you said, the Peshmerga is already effective. They are just as viable as any country in the region, and even more than some countries.
And Nouri al-Maliki has reminded Iraqis that his party still holds the largest majority in parliament and reiterated that he doesn't want to step aside. What do you think will become of him?
Well, no, I think a large part of the Shia community leaders, they are opposed to Maliki leading the new government, but the state of the law is more likely to be the leader in the new government. So his party will be at least the kingmaker. But Maliki himself, I don't think he has the momentum for in his favor. There are considerable forces within Iraq, even Iraqi Shiites, who don't like to see him running for a third term, including Hakim and Sadr, and even Sistani made statements against him staying in power.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me, Hassan, Research Associate at the Delma Institute in Abu Dhabi.
My pleasure.
And for more updates, please visit levant.tv. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.